Hello, I'm Jake Boudrot, Civic Journalist at Tello Community Television. Today I have with me Trevor Boudreau, MLA for Richmond. Welcome back to Tello, Trevor.
Thanks for having me, Jake.
So I understand recently you decided to seek re-election in Richmond. You're the nominated candidate for the Progressive Conservative Party. And I guess the first question is why did you decide to re-offer?
Well, look, it's no secret I've been here 3 years, and a lot of effort goes into it, not only from myself, but it takes a lot of toll on a family. So these conversations are certainly a family conversation, and my wife and kids are very supportive of me continuing on in this journey, and certainly there's obviously I have a motivation that I want to see things continue to progress. Healthcare was a big ticket item for us over the last 3 years and continues to be. And being in healthcare myself and my wife in healthcare, we recognize that there's still more work to do, and we want to be a positive part of that. So that was one of the first things, and certainly representing the people of Richmond has been an honor and a privilege. And I will say, the people here have been really good to me, and I try to do for them what I would want my MLA to do. And so you continue to put that foot forward, and I think there's an opportunity for me to continue to do that. So I put my name forward again.
Now, if re-elected and heading into what we expect will be an election, possibly 2025, I guess, what are your main priorities?
Good question, and again, it's no secret. I said earlier that healthcare was a priority and certainly continues to be, and I think a lot of our announcements that we've had, not just recently but over the last 3 years, have been around healthcare. But certainly we're also, it's no surprise, affordability and housing are things that have impacted people across this country, but really across this province, and so those are priorities that I see as well. And locally in our neck of the woods, the infrastructure around us is so important. The calls we get on cell coverage and internet and roads, those things are still very important, and it's important to have somebody advocating about those things. And certainly our government has taken initiatives on all those fronts. Internet is continuing to be fiber op going through rural Nova Scotia, but also our investment of $40 million that we've put forward for cell coverage across the province to support it in rural areas. That's an initiative that I want to see kind of finished as well. And of course, roads, right? Everybody, the first 5 kilometers out of your door is the most important for everybody. And so certainly advocating for people on those fronts are something that I think is still important.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned healthcare, and we know that the plans have been released for St. Anne, the new St. Anne Centre facility, and I know you've had some involvement in that, and maybe you can speak about that.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been up to date. Certainly, Lynn and I have conversations regularly about what goes on. St. Anne's is a community, long-term care facility, so they have a board of directors, and they're going through the process. We approved, in principle, the building of a new St. Anne Centre. It will have, an increased number of beds as well, but certainly they're going through those steps. And at their AGM just recently in June, they showed some of the visuals of what St. Anne's will look like. It's a beautiful looking facility, and hopefully, tenders go out soon, and then breaking ground will happen in the near future, with an expected date of 2026 as well.
Now, on the housing front, we spoke with a developer who said he found that some of the rules, provincial rules in particular, around housing that don't provide the incentive for developers, and that some of these rules tend to be a tad cumbersome and kind of put a lot of financial onus on and stress on these developers. And I know you're in community services and that. Do you think the existing provincial regulations work? Do they need some tweaking or any kind of changes? Yeah,
and I would say, our position is we need housing across the spectrum as a province. We need affordable housing, we need market housing, and so as a government, we've committed a significant amount of money to supporting those types of initiatives, and some of our programs are tied to nonprofits, but some of them are in terms of supporting developers who want to do affordable housing. I'm in chats, regularly with the department about concerns that I hear from developers who say, sometimes the red tape is a bit arduous, or, the system seems a little bit, not to their advantage. And so we continue to look at things, and I'm very proud of the work that has gone on in the department, and really committing to building the first public housing units in almost 25 or 30 years in Nova Scotia. I think it's now up to 275 or 280 units. Doesn't sound like a lot in the grand scheme of things, but when you haven't built any in a number of years, it's certainly significant. I can think of other initiatives. There's been 6 new modular homes that were put in Port Hawkesbury, 4 of those relating to supporting healthcare workers moving to our community, and 2 of them for supportive housing or affordable housing as well. Being the former Minister of Community Services, certainly I got exposed a lot to kind of the homelessness file, and certainly the challenges with affordability that Nova Scotians and Canadians and people across the globe are feeling. And so there's a real challenge there, and certainly we have to continue to be nimble, and we have to continue to look at programs. And I take all that the perspectives and opinions from the developers and nonprofits that I hear from, and share those certainly with the department to see if there are changes that we can make.
You talked about affordability, and I know the opposition parties are claiming that some of your government's economic policies are squeezing Nova Scotians financially, but is that a fair thing to say, given that a lot of that onus could be put on the federal government?
Look, I think we all have a role and responsibility in terms of supporting Nova Scotians and Canadians, but the reality is there's a lot of programs and supports that are out there for individuals, and the province absolutely wants to support people where we can. There's been a number of different announcements with respects to affordability, and I think of, even early on, before affordability was necessarily an issue, with our Seniors Care Grant, and I think of the increases in the home heating rebates and those types of initiatives to support people locally, or the Efficiency Nova Scotia heat pump programs to get people off of expensive oil. Those are things that our government has taken very seriously. We continue to certainly look at ways of supporting affordability. Opposition's role is to hold government account, and I think it's important to have opposition parties raising flags and giving their concerns. And with all that being said, there are pressures that come from outside of government that impact us, whether it's interest rates, whether it's carbon taxes, whether it's a whole bunch of other things that are impacting rural Nova Scotians in particular that we need to continue to look at ways to support.
On the subject of the opposition parties, the Liberals and the NDP are claiming that your parties flip-flopped on Coastal Protection Act, that the PC caucus supported it in 2019, but then upon coming into power, decided not to proceed with the legislation, and are instead kind of putting it on municipalities to pass their own legislation. And they're claiming that a lot of Nova Scotians support a uniform act across the province, but your government has kind of disputed that, saying that there's a lot of people who don't want that. Mm-hmm. And what is your take on it? Is there a need for provincial legislation, or is it just better off leaving it up to municipalities and other jurisdictions? So
there is a coastal protection plan. The province has recognized certainly that climate change is happening, and there are challenges that are impacting our coastal properties across the province, and so that plan is there, and it's in place to kind of give people and give municipalities the tools to identify what are the challenges. And one municipality might be very different than another. If you're in an area that's a very rocky area that's not sandy, you're less risky to coastal erosion. So every municipality is going to be a little bit different. I will say a number of residents reached out to me here in Richmond County in particular, stating they weren't happy with the idea of a Coastal Protection Act. And to be honest, that is something that I've raised with the department, saying, how can we make sure that we give people the tools to understand where is it safe to build, and to give them those tools to make those decisions, but to tell people where they can build, and tell them particularly that they can't build in certain places without giving them an opportunity to understand why and what's in their best interest. It's a challenge for property owners, and I think of a lot of the little properties across Ilmadam and in Lordways, where right now, if you had the Coastal Protection Act as was planned 5 years ago, you wouldn't be able to do any renovations to your house. Not only would you not be able to build, you wouldn't have been able to do major renovations. So we have to look at all of those factors and say, how do we make sure people have the information they need to make the best decision to have a safe place for their house while making sure we protect our coastline? And so that's what we want to do. Our government is working with municipalities. We've created a fund and we've created a position to support them in looking at what works best for their municipality. And everyone could look a little bit different. And so I think we're trying to find that balance, and we'll continue to watch how things unfold.
Now, earlier you talked about roads, and you mentioned there's some paving going on this year in Richmond County. And one criticism that was leveled last summer, and I don't know if it's come up again, has been the roadside clearing. And I know that there was some concerns expressed, I guess. Maybe first you can talk about some of the paving that's going on, and then maybe we can address the roadside clearing.
Sure. What I would say is, it's always you're always advocating and fighting on behalf of your area when you're meeting with the department or certainly having conversations. And so certainly my focus has always been about safety, and it's always been about saying we need safe roads. And part of having safe roads is visibility, and so having those areas mowed and the brush cut, and certainly our government has invested actually an increased amount of money to doing brush cutting and clearing, and you would have seen some of that on the 104. It's been well kept over the years, but where sometimes we fall short is on our rural roads and our more, and those are the roads where people are walking on the sides of the roads. And so I've been, for 3 years, continuously pushing, and it's nice that our residents feel comfortable reaching out to me saying, hey, like, this road is not in great shape, or this, so it kind of helps us plan for the future years. And there's different budgets allotted for whether it's paving or what we call rim work or gravel work. And so the rim work is a lot of that brush cutting and a lot of that other side of it. And so the department sits down and says, where are our biggest needs? And they try to work at that. And then if there's extra monies that become available, they pick at more. So I'm always looking to make sure that we have safe roads, and that will always be a priority. And so part of that is, like you say, the mowing on the sides and the brush cutting, and I think they responded quite well last year. They rented an extra couple of pieces of equipment and were able to do a bit more. But there's always more to do. I half jokingly say, lend me a tractor with a side mower while I'm out visiting constituents, and I can mow some of the sides for you. But yeah, it's one of those, I think, jurisdictions that do it well. I think of PEI as a great example of a place that does their side mowing very, very well, and I keep using those examples of how can we do it better as well. So.
And you mentioned earlier that there's going to be some paving in the eastern part of Richmond County, and as well, I believe in September, McCackern Road in West Ayrshire is going to be paved too, so maybe.
Yeah. So a lot of people would have known that the 104 had those major, and there's still some ruts over towards Sporting Mountain area, but a lot of concern about the ruts in the road. Yes. And that part of the 104 isn't scheduled to be repaved fully for the next 5 years. And so one of my things that I advocated for last year is the safety of those ruts. And so certainly there was some micro sealing that was done, and that has kind of for 6 kilometers, and that will help and hold us over until that paving project can come to its fruition. The Fleur-de-Lis Trail, probably, I think if you were to look back at the CAA's most dangerous roads in Canada, it was up there in the Atlantic Canada side for years. There's been, I think it's 13 or 14 kilometers of paving there over the last 3 years, and so that's getting its 6 kilometers this year, which is great work, because rural areas of the province are often the ones that are left, and I would say it was over 30 years since they had any pave. And then again, McCackern Road is getting a redone, some paving, some ditching, some culverts, the whole 9 yards there as well. So there's a lot of gravel work going on. Loch Lomond Road is a major thoroughfare for many people that are connecting from whether it's Lordways area, Grand River area, down to the number 4, and so it's an important piece of infrastructure, and so it's getting a lot of work this year too, and well needed. So it's busy on those next to the woods, but it's nice to see. And again, I'll be meeting with the department sometime here in the late summer to go over the concerns that I see this year for next year, and start saying these are the things I see. They connect it with what they see, and we try to find a common ground. So,
are you confident that the work that's going to take place on McCachran Road, now that it's the main area to access St. Mary's and Jamron's Island, is going to be adequate enough, given the state and what's planned now that the bridge in Port Royal is not going to be there anymore?
Certainly, that's my expectation. That is what I've asked for the department to do, is to make sure it's up to a standard that is safe, that meets the requirements of the residents and the tourists alike. Look, you know, it's no secret that you know, that bridge was removed this spring. Over the last 2.5 years, I've had a number of different officials down to look at that, to say, could we put a new bridge in there? And it wasn't in the cards with the department. And I use kind of the baseball analogy sometimes, right? You get up to bat and you swing for a home run. Sometimes you get a single, sometimes you get a double, and sometimes you strike out. And in this case, I think it's more of a, you know, if we weren't getting that bridge, then we needed a safe way. You need a safe passage there. So my expectation is it should be a safe passage, and we'll continue to advocate for that, for the residents there and for tourists who come on this beautiful island. So.
Now on the topic of roads, the road leading to the park in Martinique is still one lane at the access point, I guess, the entrance to it. Is there any update on what's going to happen there? Yeah,
and that's been, you know, kind of going on for a little while, and certainly, you know, when there was the washout there and it was unsafe, Natural Resources applied for an emergency permit from Department of Fisheries and Oceans, the federal department, and were denied. And so they have to go through that process, which they could only do in June, which they applied. That process is never as quick as we like. I'm really pleased that Natural Resources and Public Works departments could work together to at least give us the one lane that's there now. But it is, you know, the commitment from the department to move as quick as they can on it once the permits are in place and once they work out the details with Public Works. But those two departments are coordinating kind of that effort. There is a cross culvert that is a Department of Public Works culvert that goes into that culvert. And so it's important to make sure that those connections are all safe and proper, so that you don't have a washout of the main road either at some point, you know, because of something you do improperly. So I ask frequently for updates, and I'm hopeful that it'll be done soon.
On the topic of another park, that would be the beach in Pondville. I know that there was an anticipation there would be some work done this year. Maybe that was unrealistic. It's hard to say, but the hope was they were going to be starting some of the work, but it seems like nothing really was done there this year. But what's your take on what's going on there?
Yeah, so the plan for this year, my understanding, was to start on the parking area and new washroom facilities and, yes, new change rooms. And so the department goes through a process of kind of like an archaeological dig to make sure there's nothing in the area that they, you know, that is deemed you know, an artifact. When they did do those shovel tests, they actually did find an artifact. And so that has kind of pushed it a little bit. So what they are doing now is doing a more in-depth look. I don't have a whole lot of details in terms of what I can share right now, but they are going to be doing that in-depth look and then moving as quickly as they can, if everything goes according to plan there, to try and do some work. So I hope to still see some work done in this fiscal year. But I can't say for certain at this point.
On the healthcare file, and I know this has been a file that's of importance to you personally and to your government and to the Premier. And you know, I've said it before that it seems like, you know, the government has really gone all in on healthcare. You know, spending a lot of money, yeah, really marshalling a lot of resources. But the opposition says, you know, if you look at the number of Nova Scotians needing a doctor, emergency departments not open as often as people would like, perhaps some longer waiting times for ambulances and things like that. Those metrics indicate that there has been progress in healthcare. I assume your government and you would disagree with that there has been progress in healthcare.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and again, I look back to one of the reasons I ran was because of healthcare. Probably the number one reason I ran was because of healthcare. I was in the system. and I'm still, my wife's still in the system, and we seen the chaos that was happening 8 years ago, 7 years ago, and the government of the time wouldn't acknowledge it. And it's kind of like it takes years for something to happen and for that tsunami to hit, and then when it hits, it takes some time to fix it. And I would say there are metrics you can always look at that say, look at how bad this is. There are metrics that I would say that would tell you healthcare is you're starting to see that needle shift. And I would use the example of there's 67,000 extra available appointments across the province every month for people to have access to care. And we talk about access. Access isn't enough if you have a GP, but you can't see them for 4 weeks or 5 weeks. That's, is that true access? Access is, being able to see them in a timely manner. So some of the initiatives, whether it's the pharmacy clinics, the virtual care clinics, the collaborative centers that we've opened and expanded just recently, the one in Port Hawkesbury, and it's about giving people their scopes of practice. So I'll give you an example. When I first moved here back home 11 years ago, I negotiated locally having my own x-ray privileges. I was the only chiropractor in rural Nova Scotia that had access. And I get a letter from the department maybe a year and a half later saying, you know what, we need to save money, we're gonna cut you having access. And I said, how does that save money? And they said, well, you're not gonna be able to order x-rays. But I said, well, now I have to send them to their doctor. Their doctor takes the requisition. They go get the x-ray, they go back to their doctor. That's 2 doctor's visits. That could have been for somebody else that aren't, that they can't take now because somebody has to go get an x-ray requisition and come back and get it. And they said, that's a different department. That doesn't matter to us. And I would say it's the same taxpayer. So now all chiropractors across the province, and now all physios will be soon too, will be able to order x-rays. And you're going to free up all of those appointments. So instead of now it taking that much longer to see your doctor, you might be able to get in quicker. It's, another big initiative that I think probably should have done many years ago is another medical school, one in Cape Breton, that focuses on rural medicine. And so we know we're not pumping any medical, doctors out today. This is a long-term vision. This is about saying this was the right thing to do, and if we'd done it 10 years ago, we'd have 200 more doctors in the system, but we don't. So you got to start somewhere. You got to put that initiative forward. But I think about also the preventative stuff we're doing, and one of the ones I was really proud of recently that was in our budget was about the glucose monitors and the insulin pump programs. And those are types of things where if you can prevent something from getting too bad, you're saving the healthcare system many dollars and many hours, right? So those are the types of initiatives that if you continue to put forward, you're going to see that change over time. And it's going to take time because, it's not just an injection of money and something comes back out of it. It's about human capital. It's about investing in CCAs. We just recently announced free tuition for paramedics. It was just said yesterday, I think there's an extra 2,600 nurses in the system that weren't there before. All of these things are taking shape. And what I would say is it's a grind and it takes time, but I think what you'll see are the needle changing. And very proud of the work of the minister and certainly the premier on this file. It's a daunting task, but we're being watched by every province in this country, seeing what we're doing because, like you said, we put this as a priority and this is a focus, and so they're seeing how this is coming about. But yeah, it's a challenge.
Well, that's everything for me. We covered a lot of ground in our discussion. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to come here and answer these questions here at the studios at Tillow.
Absolutely. We're very lucky here in Richmond to have a facility like this to be able to have these ideas and share these conversations. A lot of my colleagues don't have this opportunity. So thank you to you, Jake, and the team for having this here for us to be able to have these conversations.
Appreciate it.